Hello, my name is Matthew, and I just finished reading The Adventure of the Retired Colourman by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. And this is the conclusion of my read-along project and book club with Steve Donahue. This is now finally the last short story by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, with Sherlock and Watson as our main characters. 56 short stories and 56 videos talking about these short stories. What great fun, and I'm so excited to be sitting here finishing this challenge, making all of these videos, and having such a great time. It was hardly a challenge at all. The short stories are just so addictive and engaging, and have a driving power about them. After you finish a short story, you really are compelled, if you're reading at night, it's bedtime, to finish one, you're really compelled to maybe check the page count on the next one and see if maybe you can read one more before bed. And as a whole, it's an incredibly impressive body of work. There's an extremely high standard that carries through all of these stories. The characterization, the setting, the tone, the actual mystery, the examples of Sherlock's deduction, the payoff, the theatrical conclusions. For the most part, any one of these 56 is representative. It's a good example of the collection as a whole. Towards the back end, the back nine, it did start cracking and wavering, and the lows were hitting a little bit lower. Some of the stories were terrible, but out of 56, 50 are great, and there's a handful that, of course, that are my favorites, or will be someone's favorite short story, things like that. But really impressive. I've now spent a lot of time with Sherlock and Watson. The only thing left would be the novels. I think there's 4 novels. But here we are at the end of the run. I'll say at this preamble, thank you for watching. If you've watched all of these videos, I'd be very interested to know and how you enjoyed them. It's been great fun, and I very much look forward to hearing what Steve has to say about them as well. And as this is the last short story, I found it satisfying. It was great, and it was terrific. It felt like a tale of the week, like so many of these short stories, which I think is a great way. It's a great send-off. Doyle had his theories. This is a character that he was wrestling with. He's pulling on Sherlock's arm, and the public is pulling on Sherlock's other arm. And Doyle had his own theories of bringing this to a conclusion. So killing him off, having him be retired, having one last hugely epic case where the stakes couldn't be higher. I've had my own theories reading these, just having fun, wondering and imagining how I would wrap it up, as having the experience of reading them all so quickly, in such quick succession. The idea of the final short story being written by Sherlock, where Sherlock writes the case which involves the death of Watson, the chronicler, the biography of all of these cases that we've been reading. I thought that would be an interesting idea and emotionally effective, or affecting, And recently I thought, what if instead of Sherlock being tired of Watson writing these stories, what if Watson became disillusioned and found that these stories were not for the public good, and found that there was harm in pulling the curtain back on Sherlock's tricks and showing all of these outrageous and ingenious criminal ideas and schemes and things like that. The ending, the adventure of the retired colorman, probably is the best way of ending it. Just another case of the week, showing off everybody's skills, Sherlock's and Doyle's, and just having a great puzzle mystery to explore. There is a slight tonal difference. We are finding Sherlock to be in an ill-tempered mood. He's negative and pessimistic. And the story begins with Watson passing a gentleman on his way up the steps into the Baker Street apartment where he finds Sherlock. Sherlock remarks or asks, did you notice the person that you passed? And Watson, and he says, yes, indeed. And he says, what do you think of him? And Watson says, a pathetic, futile, broken creature, misanthropic, hugely critical and negative. Sherlock's response of the gentleman that he had passed, and the gentleman that had just sat in the apartment talking to Sherlock. Exactly, Watson. Pathetic and futile. But is not all life pathetic and futile? Is not his story a microcosm of the whole? We reach, we grasp, and what is left in our hands at the end? A shadow, or worse than a shadow, misery. Just sad and a little wistful and melancholic. And so we learn the story of the retired colorman. That futile, pathetic creature came to Sherlock. His story, he's a 60-some-year-old man who had retired. He spent his whole life grinding away at the job, and he was someone that worked with art materials, and his name would be on paints. He's making these paints. And he led a productive life, responsibly saved his money, did fairly well for himself, and in his 60s he decided to retire and just enjoy his retirement. Very quickly, he marries a woman 20 years younger than him, and he now has a married life with a much younger woman, and he likes to spend his time playing chess. And there's a young man that comes over and plays chess with them. So there's a trip. What ends up happening is his younger wife and his chess partner run off together, and the color man had a bank vault of sorts in his own house. It had a big iron door and iron lashings on the windows, and he comes into the house and has been robbed. All of the cash is gone, all of his treasury notes. So he's there asking Sherlock for help. Maybe we can find them. Maybe we can get the money back. They've gone missing, and they've taken his entire fortune. So it's left him this futile, pathetic, broken creature of a man. And Sherlock asks Watson to take up the first leg of the case and says, Sherlock says, I'm already involved in a case. I can't leave. You go do the reporting for me and come back. And we've had this happen a few times, and it's one of the one of those details of consistency that has come up throughout these stories that I absolutely love. Watson goes off, and Watson thinks he's doing a pretty good job. Goes there, figures out the house. There's a mysterious, tall, dark man, mustachioed. Asks, is this the house that the Colourman lives in? Yeah, he thinks the guy gives him a suspicious look. He meets the Colourman, who has an unusual name. I should say his name. Let me see. It's Hosea. Hosea something. Mr. Hosea Amberley. And when he finds him, he's currently engaged in painting the door frame of the exterior house. The property has been left in ruin, not because of this recent development, but just continual neglect throughout the time that he had moved there and lived with his wife. They just left the house in disrepair. But he's out there painting a doorway. And Sherlock interjects and says, what color was the paint? I think it was green. And Watson goes through everything that he found. He comes back to Sherlock. And something that I haven't mentioned I don't think I've mentioned at all throughout all of these stories, is the affectionate portrait that Watson has of Sherlock, which we've talked about, but also the near romanticism. There's a tenderness and like a passionate affection that does seem erotic and romantic. And let's see, this is Watson. This is peppered throughout all of these stories. How Watson describes Sherlock. It was late that evening before I returned to Baker Street and gave an account of my mission. Holmes lay with his gaunt figure stretched in his deep chair, his pipe curling forth slow wreaths of acrid tobacco, while his eyelids drooped over his eyes so lazily that he might almost have been asleep, were it not that at any halt or questionable passage of my narrative they half lifted, and two gray eyes, as bright and keen as rapiers, transfixed me with their searching glance. So, Watson starts telling him everything that he figured out, and is rather proud of what he's written down. He remembered the ticket number of the wife. There was an unused train ticket. He knew that the man was kind of suspicious. He's describing the house in great detail. And Sherlock, at one point, humorously, essentially has to say, like, speed it up. So we get that sort of romanticized description. He's talking about the facade of the house and the ivy going up the house, and maybe trying to do his best paralleling the observational skills that Sherlock would have by not just saying that there was a flight of steps, but counting the number of steps. And Sherlock goes, speed it up. I get it. It's a brick wall. What next? Goes through and says, that's everything that I found. And Sherlock says, very impressive. And Watson says, oh, okay. And Sherlock says, of course you missed everything that was important, but I was able to glean a few things under your misguided observations, which that's the moment that's happened a few times where Watson thinks he's doing a pretty good job, and he's missing all the clues, disrupting everything. Which, of course, we also get the moments of Watson being aggravated because he thinks he did a pretty good job. So we start getting involved in the story. We find out that Sherlock actually knows the mysterious, tall, dark, mustachioed man that pointed out the house and was actually following Watson around. The Colourman is called back to Sherlock's apartment, and he says, "I have a telegram from a vicar at like the other side of England, like way far away, and says he has news of your cash and your treasury and your banknotes and all these things." And he says, "You and Watson are going to go there and figure out what he knows." The Colourman says, "How on earth could he know anything? I'm not going." And there's an argument that goes back and forth. And Sherlock says, "This is going to look pretty poorly in the eyes of the police, and also in my eyes, if you don't go." And he grumbles, and him and the Colourman and Watson go off. And it's this miserable trip. It takes all day to get there. They get delayed. They have to stay overnight. Watson's pretty unhappy with this guy. He has bad attitude. He's miserly, miserable. When they get there, the vicar has no idea. They find the vicar. He has no idea what they're talking about. And the telegram was a forgery. So in the meanwhile, now we know Sherlock has sent them off on a wild goose chase to ensure that they would be away for an extended period of time. And Sherlock even told Watson, "Do not let him out of your sight. Do not let him turn around. Make sure he gets there." And Sherlock and the mysterious gentleman, who turns out is another consulting detective that is only introduced in this story, they had been both looking into this case. Sherlock in the way of Watson, and the mysterious man, they're looking around and realizing Watson's kind of suspicious. So it's kind of like a spy versus spy. They don't know each other. So the Colourman and Watson get back to the Baker Street apartment. They have a telegram they have a note left there that they now need to go back to the Colourman's house. And the Colourman is just like beside himself, furious. He got sent on this wild goose chase. Sherlock's just sort of like manhandling him around. Gets back to the house, and the mysterious man and Sherlock are sitting in the house. They've gone through and looked at everything, figuring stuff out. And the Colourman says, "Okay, so what?" And Sherlock says, "Well, I only have one question for you. Where'd you hide the bodies?" And so what we find out is that this pathetic, futile man murdered his wife, and his chess partner figured out they were having an affair, and then concocted this scheme to make it look like they ran off with all of his money. And then maybe another part down the line was that the money was going to be retrieved, but they've gone missing. And that's going to be the story. The paint was the clue, one of the clues. The ticket was another clue, but the paint, realizing that he's trying to foul up the house with odorous chemicals. And Sherlock realized straight away he's trying to conceal another smell. And at the very end of this, there's one loose end that the reader might think about, which is, well, okay, so he came up with this scheme, and everything seemed to go according to plan. So why, then, did he go to Sherlock in the first place? It seems as though if he didn't go to Sherlock, no one else would have figured this out, and he would have gotten away with it. And it was because of the Colourman's misguided confidence. He felt that he had pulled off the perfect crime, and a way of ensuring that he pulled off the perfect crime is to bring in the greatest consulting detective. He would realize that it's unsolvable, it's a puzzle that cannot be unpuzzled. And then definitely, without a doubt, these two ran off with his money. He's the victim. Instead, of course, nobody outsmarts Sherlock Holmes, and he figures it out. And just because I just thought of it, let's see what the very last passage is, last sentence. After all this, and it also ends, there was an inspector there that was trying to figure things out, and Sherlock made sure to say that you can have credit for it. And so we had a nice little article talking about the impressive skills of this local inspector who, like a wizard, figured out all of these things. Very nice touch there. It's a recurring theme that's happened throughout all of these, a nice callback. And the inspector's name was McKinnon, and so they read this article where Inspector McKinnon's getting all the praise, and Sherlock ends the final passage. Well, McKinnon is a good fellow, said Holmes with a tolerant smile. You can file it in your archives, Watson. Some day, the true story may be told. The end. The Adventure of the Retired Colourman, the very last short story by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, with our amazing main character, Mr. Sherlock Holmes, and his friend and confidant, Dr. Watson. So, thank you for watching. If you've watched all of these or any of these, thank you so much. I hope it's been fun. It's been fun for me. So thank you for watching. Please leave a comment if you would like, and take care.